Just waiting on the live notice. Okay, looks like we are live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Please share this with a friend, invite your friends, invite your family, because we are about to have a very exciting and impactful conversation this morning. First of all, I want to wish everyone a happy Women's History Month. This is the month that we celebrate women, and we always want to have a very powerful woman speaker in the month of March, and we certainly have that today. I'm Depelsh Magruder, the founder of Mob United, and we're just so excited to have you here. We've now been doing this for almost 7 years, right, Kim? In July, it will be our 7th Mobiversary, as we call it. And so much has happened. We're going to have some very exciting news to share soon, but we won't do that today. I just want to tell you a little bit about our speaker, and then we just want to get right into this conversation. Her name is Dr. Robin Smith, and she is a best-selling author, sought-after speaker, experienced media personality, and she addresses today's most pressing societal challenges through what we call fearless truth-telling, which I love that. You know, there's a lot of ways you can do fearless truth-telling. Dr. Robin does it very well. Some people do it with tough love. Her approach is tender and tough, I would say, but she is a licensed psychologist, and she brings a uniquely healing perspective to our nation's most daunting social justice and mental health issues, from systemic racism, racial violence, grief, loss, discrimination based on gender and sexual orientation. She helped many get through the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the issues that caused. And she is the author of the New York Times #1 bestseller, Lies at the Altar, The Truth About Great Marriages. And she's also the author of the soulful memoir, Hungry, The Truth About Being Full and also Inspirational Vitamins, A Guide to Personal Empowerment. So you may remember Dr. Robin from the Oprah Winfrey Show. She was the psychologist in resident on that show, and we watched her for many, many years, giving people sage advice and making people cry and all kinds of things. So grab your tissues, we may cry today. And she has her own show, the Dr. Robin Show, on Sirius XM satellite radio. So hopefully you're checking that out. But she's also advising many organizations, many corporations on a whole host of issues. And we are just so blessed and fortunate that she decided to spend some time with us this morning. So we have about an hour, and we have some questions that have been submitted in advance from the audience. We're taking questions. So if you have a question, feel free to post it on Facebook, and I'll monitor and try to surface those questions, and we'll just take it from there. But whatever you want to ask, nothing's off limits. We will do our best to address it. But first, I would just like to ask Dr. Robin to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your work and your life's journey.
Yes. So good morning. I am grateful to be here with Moms of Black Boys United. It's such a sacred space. I said this to you and your team when we met a couple of weeks ago, that this was not just an event for me. This is a space that I take so seriously, what it means to mother and parent Black boys, and what it means to mother and parent ourselves, because that's some of what we're going to be talking about today. Not only the way in which we care for our sons and our Black boys, but the ways in which we care for ourselves so we can care for them. I know we talked about protecting our sons by, underline, highlight, by protecting ourselves as moms. And so it's really important. We have a lot of fantasies about how we can love our boys, how we can keep them safe, how we can mother them productively. And we're not thinking about what fuel, what gas we need to make that journey for ourselves. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm not a mother a mother from the womb of a Black boy, but I do have a nephew who is now an adult. I have a brother who actually suddenly and unexpectedly, he's a twin to my sister. Just 5 months ago, they're 11 years older almost. And my brother Damien died suddenly. He had just taken an extraordinary trip to Paris with friends. He was living his own best life. And I also watched him navigate what it meant to be, even though he was so much older, what it meant to be a Black, teenager by the time I was born. I remember very vaguely that the police, my brother was at our home, my father, a Black man, a physician, civil rights leader, also clergy, my father. I remember my brother being that the police came on our home property because my brother was, I think, taking the trash in or out, climbing over a gate that was our gate. And they wondered, what was he doing? He's like, I live here. My father is, Dr. Smith. And so I remember as a child that injury and my parents talking about that. And I've wondered how that shaped my brother's life, how it broke his heart over and over again, and the ways in which he navigated well or did not navigate well at times his own journey. My father's brother was murdered as a young man. Again, this was long before I was born, but my siblings were born by a group of people, a mob, really. And there's a lot of meat to that story that we don't have time for today. But you asked, what is my story? So I grew up with Black men who were brilliant, who were brave, who also were assaulted and harmed, either by law enforcement or by the community or by themselves in certain ways because of the injuries they carried. You know that my dissertation, a long time ago, my doctoral dissertation was on the rites of passage of adolescent Black boys. So this thrust we have now in this country in particular about Black men and Black boys, it's kind of like the new thing. But for those of us who understood the precious life that Black boys in particular had, and that it's been under assault long before it was front page news, and violence was harming our sons and our boys. So my dissertation, again, I graduated in 1994, so I'm aging myself, but I claim that all of it was because I understood the journey of particularly young Black boys and the voicelessness that so many of those young men, those adolescents had. The last thing I will say, as we are co-creating this conversation today, and I believe that something transformative is going to happen in our time together. And the transformation, I believe, is that we as women, we as mothers, because we're all mothering someone, and if we're not mothering a child, we certainly need to be mothering ourselves. And so the last story I want to tell is one of my closest, oldest friends had a son, and she has 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son. And her son was a sensitive, vibrant, smart boy. And he used to come and talk to me, and he was really very much like a son to me. And his father and his mother, to some extent, shamed him for his tenderness. They shamed him because his heart was available to his feelings, because they were afraid of what would happen to their Black son if he wasn't hard and tough and they didn't realize, and many of us don't realize, what will happen to our sons if they are only hard and tough. What will be lost in their vibrance, their black joy, their black boy joy. I mean, where is that in our equation? And so my friend, her son lived and got in some legal trouble. And she called me and said, I'm on my way to this facility where he is locked up. She had just gotten the call. And she said, I'm going to lay into him. And she went on as she's on the road. We're in different states. And I let her talk. And then I said, no, you're not. No, you're not going to go where he's already broken and break him some more. And so I want us here to realize that sometimes because we as mothers and women are scared, that our anxiety translates into further aggression with our boys and our sons. So this isn't about shaming us or blaming us. It's about, with a tender, honest look, to begin to see how can we mother ourselves so that we can mother our boys and our girls more effectively, more efficiently, and more vibrantly with freedom, and not from a place of fear.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Robin. Like you said, we met initially a couple weeks ago, and I'll be completely transparent and honest. I didn't know how I would connect with you. Society has a way of dehumanizing celebrity, right? We have social media and the ability to see into the lives of people who we don't know. But you said something on that call that I shared with the group afterwards that really touched me. You said, you are who you are to others because of who you needed to be for yourself. And that completely changed my perspective on your celebrity and having watched you in the limelight for so many years. It allowed me the kindred humanness I needed to have this conversation. So thank you for being so transparent. I think as women, and especially as Black women, we measure our accomplishment in endurance. We measure what it is that we can do and our might and our strength through how much we take. But trauma doesn't translate to power. And it took me a long time to realize that. Can you tell me about the time or the space in that moment where you got there and transformed that trauma into healing and then taught yourself to heal others?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And Kim, I wanted to say this anyway, so this is perfect. Thank you for your transparency about wondering where we might bond, where we might breathe together. I also, because I listened to our meeting, realized that I called you Alexandra, not Kim. You may not have heard that, but I heard that. And so the reason I think that's so important is how we name ourselves and whether or not people hear our names, not just our physical names, but also the labels that we either give ourselves or that someone else placed on us. So you're right, celebrity and how people wear it often is the mask. Paul Laurence Dunbar said, we wear the mask that grins and lies. And not because we are big liars, but because we are people who are terrified of an honest image of who we are and who we may not be. So for me in my own life, I had 2 serious car accidents in 2010 and in 2016. One hurt my body, one left me with a traumatic brain injury. I also had my significant other many years ago. We were on a beach talking like we are sharing right now in this group. And his eyes rolled back in his head. He collapsed and he died. I was young. He was older, but young still. And there's a lot that happened in that moment, but I've known trauma. I have known the floor of my own life just being pulled from under me. And so from that, I either was going to be defined by my trauma, and there are all kinds of racial and gender discrimination realities that were in my life. And if we had time, I could tell you something that was happening not so long ago related to race and gender in terms of injustice. But if that is my only story, and if that injustice and those traumas then dictate and own the rest of my life, that means that that trauma won. And so what I decided, and it is a decision for us to make anew today, and it's not something I can make today and say, oh, it's like when people say, I've been delivered. I've been delivered from smoking. I've been delivered from self-hate. I don't hear many people say that, but we need to be delivered from self-hate. But what we don't recognize is deliverance is in the moment. And I've got to choose that deliverance every single day so that it is not something that I do once and I then am free, for all eternity. It's something that I must decide to do daily. And so what happened for me is I was given, however we understand that spiritually, a prescription. And that's wake up, show up, grow up, rise up. Yeah, to wake up. I mean, not to see what I want to see, but to wake up to see what is, to show up for active duty in my own life. As moms and women, you just said this, Kim, we've got this fantasy that somehow endurance is all we need, that we don't need to replenish the tank. And so there is a show up moment that says, okay, I need to show up for active duty in my life. Prince Charming or Princess Charming or whatever charming isn't coming, tag, I'm it. But the grow up is, the Bible says, when I was a child, I thought like a child. I acted like a child. I behaved like a child. When I became a grown woman, I had to put away those childish things. And childish could be that my only sense of identity is that I press through, that I power through. That's the new word. I kind of hate when I hear power through, because I usually know that means that a woman is neglecting herself and only fostering endurance, but there's no tenderness, there's no self-care. And if we want to rise up into purpose and into power, it does require the balance of how do I nurture and mother me.
Amen. Thank you so much for sharing that. It is very easy to get caught up in the idea that my struggle is the only struggle that exists. My right now hurt is mine and no one has ever experienced it. But you and I both know that it's a repeating cycle. So in your work, can you tell us about some of the struggles that you have heard about from moms and sons and them together and them apart as they look for their identity as a mother and as a son growing? Can you share that with the audience?
Yes, that's such a powerful question, both what the mother has said to me, what the son has said, and often what they can't say to each other. So a question that I will ask both is, where does it hurt? And who is it that caused the hurt? And they look like, well, wait a minute, I didn't tell you it did hurt. And I'm like, but I can look at your life. I can look at that there's no joy there. And I can see, instead of just labeling you as an acting out adolescent, a defiant, boy, because our boys, our Black boys, we know this, the research is showing that Black boys are written up in school, more than anyone else. Black boys are, and this is like hard to believe, that the highest expulsion. And if we were in a room together, I would have people yell out, okay, what grade do you think that Black boys are expelled at the highest level? The research showed, I'm not sure, I haven't checked it in 2023, it was in kindergarten. I remember when I first saw that, I thought, how? I mean, what could a kindergartner do? I mean, of any race or gender, that would bring about being put out of school. And now you are labeled already at 4 or 5 or 6 years old as being a problem. We know that Dr. W.E. Du Bois said, what does it feel like? How does it feel to be a problem? And the rest of that is, how does it feel to be a problem when you're not one, but you are labeled as being one? So part of what I hear from mothers who are often exhausted, you know, the word when you said, talking about mothers and endurance, the other word that mothers will talk about is their exhaustion, but they wear it as if it is almost a part of their divine birthright. Like they flashed that exhaustion card, girl, I'm so tired. And we don't know that we are entitled to rest, that we are entitled, and that if we don't rest, because I hear mothers that say, I can't, who will do all of this? Mm-hmm. And what we don't understand is that if we don't rest when we're tired, if we don't find a way, and I'm not saying it is easy, I'm not saying that there is magic. What I am saying is that you find a sister who also has a Black boy or a child or, you know, someone who can give you respite care. And respite care is important for the mother, and it is important for the son, who at times is needing a break from the intensity that his mother and or father both are placing on him, because fear that your child isn't going to come home alive, fear that your son is going to be the next Tyree Nichols, fear that somehow if you don't lay the law down, the law is going to lay your child down to rest. And I mean in death. So a conversation that's so important with the mothers, all of us who have gathered, is how do you take care of you? Whether your child is a scholar and excelling in school and you are still anxious that something is going to rock the boat, or your child is struggling with behavior. I do want to also say this. In our meeting when we got together, there was language used exploring about a child who is disobedient, a son who is, the word was used, rebellious. And I listened and I said, we need to understand what is rebellion. And this issue of even being physically violent with our Black boys who are already in a violent, aggressive world that is often dangerous for them. And so I want to invite us as mothers to check ourselves, not only before we wreck ourselves, but before we wreck our sons, and wreck them again, not because we don't care, not because we don't love them, but because we are so terrified that they're not going to be safe, that our terror translates into aggression, physical, verbal, emotional. And then we are wondering why our boys aren't talking to us, because we're not the safe, sacred place for them to come. And so today is about, again, not blaming ourselves as mothers and women and not blaming ourselves for our exhaustion. Today is about taking care of our exhaustion and figuring out what strategies as women we can begin to practice so that our tank is full as we are supporting our Black sons and boys.
Yes.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I'm going to interject, deal with my issues while I have Dr. Robin here.
Absolutely.
So, and I just want to go back to this idea of rest, because I saw a meme or something this week that said rest is not a reward. Like we think we're supposed to do all these things. And then as a special treat, after all of that, then we get to rest. And, it stuck with me. And I know there's also this woman who has written a book called The Nap Ministry or something
Yes.
like that. And on the one hand, I identified, on the other hand, I don't necessarily see rest as a reward, but I think like for me personally, there's so much I want to do in life, right? There's so much I want to do, so much I want to contribute, so much I want to give and have impact on that it's hard to justify rest. Given all the issues that we're facing as Black people, as Black women, and trying to raise our children and do whatever else we want to do in the world, it's sometimes hard to justify it. So I struggle with it. And I will say for me, I was always kind of like a active, overachieving type person. But 2 years ago, my husband died. And I feel like since then, like before, I had this whole very orderly plan of how life was supposed to go. And I'm going to do this in this decade and this in the next decade. But since then, I feel like an already overactive person who's accelerated that, because now I don't know how much time I have left. So I feel like not only do I have to do all these things, I have to do all of them right now, because I don't know how much time I have left. So it's not so much out of not believing in rest, but just wanting to fulfill my life's purpose, have the most impact possible, pour into, like you've heard the saying, leave it all on the mat. Like I'm a leave it all on the mat person. So I just want to know what advice, I don't even know what the question is. I'm just bringing my issues to you to see like, what advice would you give, given that it's not like necessarily out of a sense of punishment, but it's a sense of wanting. And I think all of us who are in Mob United too, we became a part of this organization because we want to contribute to the world in a bigger way. And we feel a responsibility to do that as Black women. And I think as Black people as a whole who feel socially responsible. So how do you balance all of that?
Yeah. Love it. And I hear the question. And I think everyone who has joined us today can raise their hand and find a really good reason to not rest, to leave it all on the mat. What I would say is a part of that is a value system that was given to you, not necessarily a value system that is best for you. And so how do you balance that? You are called? There's no question that you and the team here are called to a holy work, for sure. And I hear what you're saying about your husband dying, and that makes you aware that death is possible in a very different way than someone who hasn't experienced that. As I said, I also experienced my partner, being well and then being gone. But I will invite you with me to recognize that part of the legacy I believe you want to leave is of wholeness, and whole people also rest. Brilliant people also take time out, and they don't wait until they crash to do it. They don't burn themselves out because they realize that they can't keep going the way they're going without not just rest, but because I would put inside the word rest, play and pleasure and delight. And so I think as you are called to this very holy work, a part of what you are also invited to do with me and with Kim and with the team is to integrate. Where is it that you bring joy? The other piece is you have children, you have sons. And there is a part of also teaching our children this balance between work and play, that rest is not something necessarily as a reward. I would actually change that to say that rest is a part of our birthright. Whether it is a narrative or it is true, but that, God created the world and then rested on the seventh day. And so again, that's a narrative or it's somebody's truth, but whatever it is, even the Almighty decided that rest was important. And so I think it's important for us to recognize that rest actually fuels you to be able to do more of what you want to do with your tank full than it does if you push past your rest, your delight, and your joy. Yeah, it helps execute the mission. And that's what we have to remember. I have the friend I was telling you about, her son. She is retired now, and she'll say, she retired early. I feel guilty when I'm not doing something more because there's so much. She is a African-American doula. And, with Black maternity health, with so many Black women dying at higher incidence than white women, and Black babies are dying. And so she said, I feel like if I sleep, if I'm resting, what does that mean for the woman that needs me? And I said, but the woman that needs you also needs to see what it looks like for a Black woman to be rested and intact and whole and committed. So I think this is a wonderful question, but also a conversation we need to continue to have about the balance of work and play and joy and delight. It's our birthright.
Do you have something else, Apelsha?
No, just thank you. And I do often say we need fuel for the fight. That's why one of our pillars is self-care.
Yes.
So we do focus on that, but thank you so much.
Well, and again, we focus on it, like we say it, because look, I'm the first one to raise my hand, both, not one hand, but both, and say, I have, that's why I said I'm on this path. Just stay up an hour longer, just do this one more time, just, do this research before. And I'm like, okay, but now what you need to do is go find the joy so that when I show up with you this morning, I'm not showing up depleted. I'm here, but how much of me is really here if I left it all on the mat? I need something so that I can come here authentically awake, authentically with joy, authentically on fire, not pretending. And if we look at many of our leaders, we don't see Black, white, Latina, Asian, but particularly African-American, because of the messages we got. And I want us to understand, where did those messages come from? Often from a plantation where we were enslaved, we did not have choice, and we were worked to the bone. And so where is it that while other people had their feet up and our feet were swollen and our hands were swollen and we were worried about our own families, but we were serving someone else's? So if we dismantle where that overworking came from, that also can help us say, oh, surely I'm not bringing the plantation in 2023 into my life. No, it's certainly not without a fight.
Right. Yes.
That is actually a great segue to my next question. I want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. And I want to kind of flip it a little bit, because now in 2023, with all of the other coined statements, we hear a lot, I am enough. But how many of us feel like imposters in our own lives, right? And in our own lives, but also in our children's lives. I'm 45. I'm open about my age. Apelsha teases me about that. Everybody knows how old I am. I had the pleasure, I guess, of being young as the internet came and Facebook and all of these other systems that allowed us to connect with each other, but in so many ways disconnected us from our households and our children. And so I sometimes feel like an imposter in their lives. So my question is twofold. How do we address the imposter syndrome in ourselves as we wear the t-shirts that say, I am enough? And then how do we address that same thing as we deal with our children who are growing up in a very different time than us?
Yeah, the imposter question. It's almost like the talk that we have with Black sons, sometimes now with Black daughters. This is the talk we need to be having with ourselves, as you said, and with our children. I'm going to start with our children because, Kim, our kids can read whether we are real or not. They can read how fake, how phony, how scared we are. So as we're walking around with, I'm enough, I am enough, and our kids watch us unable, unwilling, without the skills or tools to maybe talk to our own parents honestly about how we're feeling. They hear what we say or don't say about mom and pop, and but what we're unable to address directly. And so I think a part of the imposter syndrome with our children, particularly because they are growing up in a very different world, is how real, not are we with them only, but is there anyone in my life that I am completely transparent with? And that's the question I'm posing to all of us who have gathered this Saturday morning. I mean, I tell a story in my book, Hungry, about a guy who was going to a meeting, and he kept asking, has anyone seen David? Has anyone seen David? And people were laughing because he was the only David in this organization. So my question for us today is, has anyone seen Robin? And when's the last time there was a real sighting of me? I mean, to me, like, when's the last time I looked in the mirror and saw not who I wanted to see, but I saw who was there, the part of me that isn't always feeling enough. I think about my mother, my grandmother lived to be 108 and a half. My mother was 98. Yeah, my grandmother was the daughter of someone who had been enslaved, my great-grandfather. And my grandmother, again, lived vibrant life and in her right mind enough to tell all of us how she felt in not so nice ways, which my mother right now would be so upset for me to tell you that everything wasn't just perfect. Because that's what you're talking about, Kim. You're talking about these illusions that we have bought into, that I need to be enough, I need to feel completely and show, not feel, but I need to fake it until I make it. And what I would say is sometimes, but you need some place where you can disrobe. You need some place where someone can know what you actually feel. So when's the last time someone really saw the real you? I also tell this story when I was many years ago, I was married, I was separated, and my house was empty of furniture because my husband at the time had taken what he was taking. And so life was, another one of those times where things did not work out, where I certainly did not feel like enough. And my mother came to wait for the furniture company to deliver furniture. And she says to me, honey, okay, so I knew already, honey, I was like, okay, what's coming? What's coming, mommy? And she said, are you going to put on lipstick? I was going to therapy, my own therapy. My life was falling apart. My marriage had fallen apart. And she said, well, my mother was a psychiatric social worker, one of the first Black women to graduate from Bryn Mawr College, which is an all women, it's a very fabulous school, and with her master's. But she said, people will judge you on your outward appearance. I said, well, I look how I feel. That's why I don't have lipstick on, because I look how I feel. And so I think a part of this imposter syndrome is, do we feel secure enough to show our holes? So I have this equation, holes, H-O-L-E-S, is what we all have. I have holes. And everyone, if you didn't know, like, welcome to the HOLES party. We all got holes. And so that's the good news, because now we can say, well, I don't always feel like enough. I feel like I really screwed up yesterday with my son. I was on him and I just wouldn't let it go. So we all have holes, and we all long to be whole, W-H-O-L-E, which is a holy, H-O-L-Y journey. So if we, Kim, can honor and ask, when's the last time someone saw me? And when's the last time I saw my real self? And we can show that and share that with our children. We can go and tell our kids, I told you this, but it really wasn't my own truth. And so I'm wondering right now, as we ask ourselves, have we let our children see our holes? not our wholeness, but our HOLES. Like, where did you screw up? You're not a screw up, but you did screw up. And there's a difference between I'm not cancer, but I might have it. I'm not diabetes, but I might have it. I'm not, obesity, but I might be struggling with my weight. So the issue is, can I tell the truth to myself? And this is the other piece of that. The imposter syndrome is because we have shame. And we bathe in shame. And the more we bathe in shame, the more we hide. And then the more we hide, the more we are ashamed because we know that something is off. And so this is about, where do we find a sister or a brother or someone? And do not say that I told you to go tell anybody. I'm saying, do not just tell anybody. I'm saying, find a person who is worthy of your pain, who is worthy of your shame, who is worthy of your vulnerability. And then tell them, I feel terrible. I walk around, I'm dressed up, I'm suited down, but my truth is, I feel so lost right now. And we all, me, Dr. Robin, me, the Reverend Dr. Robin, for those that don't know, I'm also ordained clergy. Me too. This is a Me Too movement right now, but Me Too, not about sexual harassment, Me Too about the imposter syndrome. And once you walk in the freedom of the truth with the right person, underline the right person, there is something that becomes liberated. And you don't need to hide from yourself or from the right people. People who don't mean you well, that's a different conversation for a different Saturday morning.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one last question before I turn it back over to DePelsha. I want to talk a little bit about how we define failure and what that looks like. We often say parenting doesn't come with a manual, but life doesn't come with a manual. You get up every day and you write your to-do list. I know DePelsha does. I do sometimes too. And then I watch it just go to Hades. Like it doesn't work out the way that I think it's going to work out. And I think that we find ourselves defining the things that get left off of the to-do list as failures, or I didn't say the right thing, or my child got in trouble. All of the things that we define as failures when there is no test, there is no manual. How do we reimagine what the struggles of the day are to where we can acknowledge our humanness such that we can show up for ourselves and for our sons?
I know I said that with each question that both of you have asked, but I love this question. And I'll tell you why, because failure is so misunderstood. Actually, there are two words, and I'm sure there are more than two, but there are two words that I think are really disabling to us. Failure is one of them, and constructive criticism, because I don't think that you can ever criticize. I think that all criticism is hurtful. I didn't say all feedback. So get me wrong. I know people are like, wait a minute, that's why you don't have any Black boys, right? I'm like, no, I didn't say but criticism harms the soul. Well, and punishment harms the soul. So failure, feeling as if we have failed, either because we didn't get, and I'm, also a to-do list kind of person, and I look at it and I think, oh, wow, like how much of that did not happen? I just found an old list and I got to check off two things. And I was like, and that was written 2 months ago. And so I had a decision to make. Could I rejoice that those things got done and that it took 2 months to get them done because they were so labored? And I think a part of this is that we set ourselves up to feel less than, because often accomplishing one thing is so magnificent, but we've got 10 things on our list to get done in a short period of time. But failure itself, to me, and I coach, Fortune 1 and Fortune 500 companies in this way. Failure is feedback. It tells me what worked and what didn't. And so maybe if I have 10 things on my to-do list and I only get 2 of them done, could it be that the feedback that's coming to me is that my to-do list is too long, that it's unrealistic, that you use the word humanity, that a human being who is living her life and there is no manual, not just for parenting, but as you said, there is no manual for life itself, except life itself. So the question is, are we receiving from life the feedback it is giving us? If our kids aren't listening to us, might it be for us to say, well, maybe the way I'm speaking with them, it's not working. They can't hear me. Instead of they don't listen. See, the moment I start blaming the other is the moment I'm losing my ability to learn. I always say that what we judge, we can't explore. What we can't explore, we can't analyze. So if I judge my kids, if I judge my partner, I now have cut off my ability to experience the feedback and say, I wonder the fact that I feel that no one listens to me in this house. Wonder what the feedback is for me. What's my tone? I know when parents say to me, I am a safe place for my kids. And I'll ask them, how do you know that? And they'll say, well, because I want them to be able to tell me everything. And I said, no, I know that. But who's the ruler? You can't be your own ruler. You can't be the measuring stick only. If you want to know if you are a safe place for your children to even bring their failures, and I'm going to say failure/feedback, then the question is whether or not they see you that way. Do they see you as a mom who they can come to and share their failure/feedback? So I think it would be wonderful if we could leave today and say to our children, our sons, our nephews, I learned something today about failure. And I know I've been tough on you. And I talk about, you can't fail. And as a Black boy, you can't fail. And, in this white world, you can't fail. And with the police, you can't fail. And I learned something that failure is maybe more about feedback. It's more about what your environment is telling you is working and not working. The other thing, Kim, I will just add to this is I have this saying about the girls in the back of the room, the back of the class. And the class is life's class. And we all have girls back here, or boys, who are telling us that we're either good enough or not. They are telling us that we are a loser, that we failed. And so what I'd like to also invite us to do today is to tell the girls in the back of the class that you're in the front of the class. You are paying attention and you don't need their commentary anymore about what you are or are not doing. If they aren't quiet, and they get loud, and they get real loud with us. So if they're not quiet, you might escort them, outside of your classroom. And again, let's remember our classroom is our life. That's where we're learning. And so any force that is condemning you, that is saying that you are failing, and this means even if you really made a big mistake, you really did something with your son and you're thinking, that was a big mistake. So now we have to talk about self-compassion, because condemnation will keep us stuck. It's liberating to say, I wouldn't do that again. And any parent and any mother of any child, but certainly of a Black boy, needs to have in her toolbox the ability to say, knowing what I know now, I didn't know it then, but knowing what I know now, I would do this differently. Guess what? I can't do yesterday differently, but what I can do is I can take that feedback from yesterday where I really feel like I blew it. I can go to my son with compassion for me. I'm not going to hate my guts for what I did. I'm just sorry and I have remorse, but I can do it differently today. And so if we can do that, instead of bonding over trauma and over what we did that we wish we hadn't done. I mean, we spilled milk. I spilled milk. This week on Monday, I told my team, I realized something. I can't change some milk that I spilled, but I certainly don't plan to spill anymore. And I explained what that meant. So this is about not lamenting where we failed. And I just want to call it feedback, where we got some feedback from life, because there's no manual. And the laboratory is our lives, that I'm going to get the feedback and I'm going to do different today. And I'm going to be kind to myself. I'm going to be loving to myself. I'm going to realize that given how I was parented, I did what I knew. I did what I knew, or I tried to do the opposite of what was done to me. And I still ended up getting it wrong. That's okay. That's called being human. And now we move into this moment of now I wake up and now I showed up and now I grew up so I can rise up into purpose and power as a parent.
Thank you so much. So we technically have about 6 minutes left. So I want to try to get in a couple of audience questions, but I'm going to consolidate them so that I can cover multiple things. So one person wrote, how do we ensure that our sons don't feel blocked or marginalized on their journey to achieving? And I'm just going to add to that. I think, part of what we do in this organization is try to help moms and sons navigate all the pitfalls they may face, to recognize when they're being a victim of discrimination or bias, to know what systems control those things and who to go to and how to interact with power. So in learning about those things, you could feel defeated for even start, depending on how you introduce those topics to a child. So the question that I think this mom is trying to ask, that I want to ask, is how do we strike a healthy balance between preparing them for the world and the challenges they may face, but not having them feel, not having them overly focus on it and feel defeated or it be to their detriment?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And part of how we do that is everything you said, to see what the resources are to protect them, to create and be a part of communities that affirm their beauty and their Blackness and their brilliance and their maleness, their sensitivity, their tenderness and their toughness, that we are raising whole Black boys. But to do that, we need to be raising whole Black mothers. And so I want to bring it back to, how do I help my son? Is actually, I help myself first. I get myself cared for. I have my own community like this one, where I am fed and nurtured. And then I can, both by example and by structure, offer what I'm doing for myself to my son. Because sometimes we are, again, trying to prop them up, and we are so downtrodden ourselves. I think the other piece of this is if we normalize what is not normal. So it is not normal that we have to have the talk. It is not normal that our children, if they are Black boys in particular, that we are terrified when they leave the house, and sometimes terrified if they are in the house. I know we talked about that often when women are carrying their babies, they sign up and become a part of this organization because they are afraid already about what is going to happen to their sons. So a piece of this is, how do we manage our anxiety and balance it with delight and joy and community, where there are people who talk the same language. They may look different. Kim, that's why I love what you said about, not being sure, how you might connect with me. And now you and I, you can't get rid of me. You're going to, I know you're getting ready to go somewhere, and and I'm going with you. So, so what I'm saying is community is so important, because that's where we learn both resources for ourselves, and we realize that there are more resources than we knew existed for our Black sons. And that's exciting. It's not exciting that they are endangered, but it is exciting that we are not alone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to combine another set of questions, and this is, I think, a more challenging situation. We have a number of moms in our group who have children who are struggling with mental health issues, with addiction. We've had suicide attempts. One mom wrote that she had to send her son away in the middle of the night to an intervention facility several times, and now he blames her for his behavior and all of his problems. Someone else wrote she's afraid at night when her teen is at home and she worries for his safety. But then someone said, so these are moms who are actively parenting, pouring all into their children. And then one person said, I'm tired and I just don't like my child right now. Is that okay? So what advice would you give to those moms trying to deal with these very challenging issues and sometimes reach a point where they feel they've done all they can do and feel like they need to protect themselves, not only mentally, but physically?
Yes. So thank you to those moms who, Kim, are not imposters. They're saying, like, I give, this is like too much. I'm tired, I'm scared, or maybe I feel like I screwed up. Having the son committed a couple of times, doing the best thing she thought, and then maybe 2020 hindsight is maybe that wasn't the way, he's blaming me. So let me start with how important it is to be able to have resources and a community of people to vet what we are doing. Because often, even that mother, and, I want to speak directly to her, who, had your son committed because of mental health issues. You may now know that that's not something you would have done, or it may have been something you still would do, and it has caused a rupture with the son. And I think this is also a part of what we want to understand. These choices are not easy choices. Whether or not we make the call to get mental health support, or we live feeling terrorized in our own homes, maybe other children being terrorized by a child who is struggling with mental health issues. We know that COVID, or I should say, I know that COVID made everything worse. And we know that, if you've heard the statement that says, when white people get a cold, Black people get the flu. So when many, people who were struggling who are not Black during COVID had a hard time, and the attempted suicide rates and the completed suicide rates went up. I just want our group here to know today that Black children, the suicide rate of Black children is escalating faster and higher than any other number, and for young children. So it is not just Black children and Black teenagers. Young children are both attempting suicide, and some of them, unfortunately, have died by suicide. So these issues are real. Depression and suicide attempts or completions, bipolar. The thing I do also want to highlight, because mental health and mental health treatment has been so taboo in our communities. I don't need therapy. I don't go to therapy. Just so you all know, I still go to therapy, meaning me, Dr. Robin, and I probably will for the rest of my life. Why? Because I deserve it. It's not for rich people, white people, or sick people. It's for whole people who have holes, HOLES, who want to be whole, WHOLE. It's an entitlement I have to find a safe place to tell my story and to get well, and to see what my options are, and to get out of my head with the girls in the back of the room telling me that there's no one there for me, or people aren't going to take me seriously if they know that I'm as real and as vulnerable as them. So I think part of this is we need, and I invite these mothers to seek if they are not already getting help for themselves. See, a lot of times we're like, my child needs help. Maybe that could be. But how about if you have a child, maybe a little older, who won't go? Well, how about you going? And how about when he says to you, where are you going? I'm going to therapy. Well, why are you going to therapy? Because I need help. I mean, because I'm trying to figure out how to be well, and I'm trying to figure out how to support you. And sometimes I think I've done a good job, and sometimes clearly you've told me I haven't. And so I'm actually taking what you've said seriously, and I'm taking you seriously. And maybe you'll go, or maybe you won't go, but I'm going because I want to get healthy and whole, and I want to be a whole mother supporting your whole journey, whatever that looks like. So some of this is also to take the pressure off of making your child do something and get yourself the help and the support that you deserve and want. The issue around safety is important. You know, what happens when a mother is feeling physically, not just emotionally, but physically unsafe? And so this is where you could say, well, you know, I could never, or I never want to put my child out because he's a Black boy, he's a Black young man. I mean, the streets are more dangerous out there, but now I'm feeling unsafe here. And so this is where we start reaching out, not only therapeutically, but what other resources, family, because sometimes I said this earlier about mothers needing respite. You know, sometimes if you're taking care of an elderly parent or a sick child, they have places where that person can go for a couple of weeks for you to get respite, or you can go to get respite. What I'm saying is, where do we begin to tell the truth to the people who care about us and our sons, and say, things are not good here. Things are not good, and I'm feeling unsafe, and clearly he's feeling unsafe. And unsafe meaning his soul. I mean, his own, something sitting on him. And I'm wondering, you know, could we both need a break. I mean, he doesn't need to be in prison, and he doesn't need to be locked up, but one of us could end up being harmed in this house, or both of us could end up being harmed. And so part of this, the journey, is how do we reach out so that we can have resources that are there to help, particularly mothers of Black boys. The last thing I will just say about that I think is so important as well, is that mental health issues have to be treated. I mean, and we have this old way of, you know, I'm going to pray about it. I'm saying, okay, but faith without works is dead. So you got to do some work. You know, I'm going to pray about it and I'm going to let God fix it. Well, the thing is that if we understand that the system that harmed you or your son, and I'm talking about systemic racism, systemic oppression, that those issues need a place to be dealt with, and to roll it over to we're just going to pray about it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with prayer, but we need the actionable tools that can deal with illness, that can deal with a heart that is broken, and betrayal that boys often can feel when they are in a power struggle with their mothers. And so you want to not be in a fight with them, not with them. You want to be fighting for them, and you can't do that if you're doing it alone.
Thank you so much. Kim, do you want to give closing remarks? This has been so powerful.
It has been, and we say this a lot, but definitely in this conversation, we could go on for hours, for days, for weeks and months.
Yes, we need a part two.
We will. I
We didn't
mean,
get to all the questions. We need a part two.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
definitely.
we will do that. Let me just ask this. Is there one question that you feel you want to put in front of me before we go? If there is, I mean, if there is
Yeah.
something that just feels like, we need to come together now about that.
DePelsha,
And I have one mainly because I want to end on a high note because that
Yeah.
was such a challenging topic. And I think there are a series of questions that ask for parenting tips to help Black boys thrive. And there's one in particular that asks, how can I create a space for my son to grow up and experience Black boy joy, which you referenced. We focus so much on systemic racism and bias and discrimination and being targeted and look out for this, look out for that. How do we bring out that joy in them and make sure they're able to thrive in that way?
That's a great question. There's a quote, an African quote that says, "The lion's story will never be known as long as the hunter is the one to tell it." And the reason I like to remind us of that and end with that as we talk about Black boy joy is, who is it that is telling your son's story? Who is it that is telling his narrative? Is it the hunter? Is it the news, the 6 p.m. or the 11 p.m. news that is telling your son's story and your story? Or is it the lion? And so I'm inviting us, what can we do? Storytelling is something that is a part of the fabric of Black culture. We are storytellers. We tell stories in song, we tell them in spoken word, we tell them in sermons, we tell them in jokes. And so part of what the tool that that question is pointing to is carving out specific time that is used for joy and delight. You've heard me use the word joy and delight. What are you doing with your sons, nephews, the Black boys in your life that is cultivating the true narrative of their lion story? So of course they've got stories about what's unfair and, my brother being, the police thinking he was a robber. I mean, as a teenage boy in our backyard, there are those stories, but I also watched my brother claim his joy and watched him laugh. And so part of our closing for part one of this is, let's identify an opportunity, everyone that's on this call, that we can consciously cultivate joy with our Black boys. So that means maybe something they love to do that, you usually don't want to do. So maybe this isn't about whether or not you want to do it, but what you do want to do is cultivate their joy. And so you decide, like, what, I know they love skateboarding. I know they want me to watch and they want me to, or I know they love this particular song that, I mean, I can't even understand what's going on, but they move and bop and move. And so this brings them joy. So maybe what I'm going to do is cook something, their favorite thing, or get their favorite snack, put the music on and start bopping. And I mean, your son will come down and think, what has happened to my mother? Where was she this Saturday morning? What happened to her? I mean, and to be able to say, I want you to claim your joy. You are a Black boy, and I want you to claim your joy. And I know sometimes I rain on your joy. I know sometimes I get in the way. So this day, in this moment, I'm going to support, claim, and I'm not saying something that, is harmful, but there's so many little and big things, but little things we can do to claim their joy and remind them and yourself that the lion story will never be known as long as the hunter is the one to tell it. So let us take back our power. Let us take back our stories. Let us be the lion and the lioness who are telling our own stories, and dare the hunter to ever tell our stories again.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen to that. So I want to leave it right there. I thank you for reminding us that there is hope in the healing.
Oh,
And I'm so indebted to you for this conversation. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for watching. You have a wonderful Saturday.
thank you. Thank you. Bless you all.
Thank you all so much. Bless you too. We will ask you to come back.
Absolutely.
Sure
I'm coming.
will.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay.